forums that you think we should talk about? I mean, there's been a lot recently.
There has been, and
Last,
we're live on Facebook in front of millions of people right now.
oh, we are.
Is it
Oh,
like 2.5 billion or something?
it looks like one.
One. Hey, that's a start. We got one reaction and one comment already. I think
There
that
you go.
comment's the one I made. So, good afternoon and welcome for the anti-Super Bowl show. Coming from Super Bowl City, right here in Minneapolis. So, I think this is pretty appropriate. Eric, my sidekick today. How's it going, my friend?
It's good. I'm happy to have joined you. My
Yeah.
roommates are watching the Super Bowl. I'll probably catch the end of it. Maybe we'll see. But I'm here in Colorado, so as someone from San Diego, the Chargers are never that great, and now they're in LA, and the Denver Broncos didn't have a good year this year. So I don't know. Everyone here is rooting for the Eagles. I think most people hate the Patriots. Sorry,
Yeah, I had no
Patriots
idea.
fans, but
All right. So, I'm just editing our post here so people know that they can join in the show. Let's see. Call into the show with this link. Let's say hi. Something rude. Somebody might say something rude. Let's see.
yeah. So that's one of the cool things about today's show is we're putting a link in there for the Be Live application, which is kind of on the back end of this show. So if you want to join in the conversation, you can.
Yep, from your
Um,
phone or laptop. Just follow that link and it'll give you the instructions. If you're on Android or iPhone, it'll have you install a BeLive app first, which is free. Then you just go back in, click that link, and you'll go into our little backstage lobby. And then, if we trust you that you're not going to cause any problems, then we'll put you on our show and we can talk kart racing because that's what
so
we do.
So one thing that's actually really cool is we got some pictures. I don't have them right in front of me, but there's some pictures out there of Wright, our guest from last week,
Oh,
in
yeah.
South Korea. Yeah, he's they're getting set up. He's got some cool pictures in front of the moguls for U.S. skiing and for NBC. So shared that this morning. I thought that was a kind of a cool thing to see racers out there doing kind of their normal day job. You know, there's a lot of people out there that have pretty interesting normal day jobs. So
Yeah, Wright's got a lot of stuff. So is it CNBC that he's a presenter for?
I thought it was NBC Sports, but
It could be NBC
you know,
Sports. That makes more sense given that it's sports, right?
I think so, and I think NBC could be wrong, but I think NBC's been the primary televiser of at least in the United States of
Sports.
the Olympics and the Winter Olympics for quite some time.
I'm going to watch the Winter Olympics, I think. I always enjoy those. They're pretty decent.
Yeah, and there's
Like
some
watching the bobsleighs because they crash. That's always worth watching.
or the
Um,
skeleton guys. Those guys
or
are
the
crazy.
skeleton guys. What was I going to say? Let's pull that up here. See if I can find a video of the bobsleigh coming down the hill in with a cart. They took a KZ down a bobsleigh track.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, pull it up here.
I think that's perfect timing.
Can you hear a little kid screaming in the background right now?
Oh yeah, yeah. On
Oh,
your new
great,
microphone, it
great.
picks that up really well.
That's a shame. It's really not meant to. So, what else you got going on this week?
Well, I just came from helping some new racers put together their cart for the second day. We got made a lot more progress, which was a lot of fun. This coming week, I'm traveling to Texas for my normal day job, and hopefully, we'll get to do some karting stuff on the weekend. But I don't 100% know at the moment.
Right. All right, I got this video here. This should be pretty hilarious. All right, you ready? This
Yeah.
is uh, this is bobsleigh in a KZ2. Let's take off this message. It's a little jittery, unfortunately. You'll get the idea in a second here.
Oh, I like the headstock placement. Now, if I was a judge, not that bobsleigh is a judged event, but I don't know if that's the proper application. Are you an over the nose or a full face guy when you use the headstock?
I don't know. I can't say I'm much of a aficionado, quite honestly.
Okay, so you prefer to have. Look at that. That's got to destroy that chassis. It must be impossible
Oh,
to
it gets
drive.
better. He bends the tie rod and stuff.
Is it just the same two shots over and over, him going up and then like
No, that's me
him coming around?
frantically searching through the video, trying to find the point that it happens here. This is where he breaks his tie rod. That's no good.
I like that it's a KZ2, that it's not, and
Yeah, it's a
if
shame
you're
we don't have
just,
the sound
yeah, if you,
because
oh, he
like he's
catches
not
air and
just
everything.
yeah, he's not freewheeling. Like he is actually legitimately like going flat out down there. I must find out who did this. It seems German. When you listen to it, it sounds like just Sprechen Sie Deutsche. Yeah, replacing the tie rod because they smacked it on the way down.
Well, credit where credit's due. He made it down to the bottom, but
I think I timed it too, but I've no idea because it's in German and I don't speak German, even though I studied it in school. Um, I've no idea if it's a competitive time compared to a bobsleigh. I would imagine that's pretty decent.
I think they're going to do a bobsleigh run and compare, though.
Are they? I don't think so. They have the clock running. Hey, at least he doesn't have to run and jump. That's a thing, right?
Yeah,
5
man.
seconds. I don't know if that's good or not. Isn't like 3 seconds a really good like get off the line time for a bobsleigh or something?
I
We'll
don't
find
know
out in a few weeks. Let's ask Mr. Hughes.
how fast Mr. Hughes can do it going downhill.
Right. I
5.33.
wonder.
5.33 for the go kart. If 3 seconds fast for the
Right.
bobsled, then they're not very good.
I mean, he's hauling there. He's got to be doing well over 100. 1 minute 11.8. I have no idea if that's competitive or not. But it looks
I
like
think
fun. I'd do it.
it varies from track to track. I don't know. Yeah, that looks like a blast. It also looks terrifying, but
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
that's awesome. Anyway, um, kind of fits our Winter Olympic time of the year, or time of the
Right?
last 4 years. That's fantastic.
Yeah. All right, so I think that's enough of that. If you just joined, welcome. We were watching a video of a bobsleigh going, or not a bobsleigh, but a cart going down a bobsleigh track because, what else would you do with a cart? You got pavement, you got dirt, now we've got ice down a hill. So, but 2 weeks ago, SCUSA announced that they were, I guess, they didn't really say exactly what they were doing, but they're in some way involved with the IKF. And
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's an interesting topic. I think it's only been about a week. I think they announced it, yeah, about mid last week or mid last week and a half ago. And yeah, my thoughts on it are, I guess we just have to wait and see. In some ways, I think for someone like myself who, was around and raced in the IKF series, in the Region 7 area in particular, kind of during, its golden age or when it was really very popular. It's sad, but at the same time, I think it's been kind of an inevitability in the last few years.
Yeah,
So, realistically, I think SCUSA has been very shrewd and cunning in how they've acquired market share over the last few years. And a lot of people have been very happy and also very unhappy at times with how they've handled things. But realistically, I think this suggests that there is the potential to bring a lot of North American karting under kind of one sanctioning body, which I think some people are apprehensive about, and some people think is the right thing to do. Maybe some other people maybe call it the European model versus the traditional American model. Whether that's good or not is certainly up for debate. But the ICAP has been around so long, and their rule book and their rule structure is so solid that I think for SCUSA it's certainly nothing but a good thing. we'll just have to see how it affects local racers kind of moving forward. If it really will affect, um, their day-to-day operations and their day-to-day rules. My hope is that SCUSA can recognize that the IKF really helps local and regional karters. In my opinion, I think they've done a lot for them through contingency programs and through the rulebook and kind of the structure that they've given a lot of organizations. So it's my hope that we will see both groups try to find a way to bring the best out of each other. But what do you think, James?
I think it's going to be pretty interesting. Depending on how SCUSA wants to play it, I think, some people are concerned that, for lack of a better explanation, some people are going to see this coming into almost like an extension of the Pro Tour, but I don't think that that's going to happen, really, because a lot of the demographic in terms of the tracks and the drivers for a lot of the IKF are really just not Pro Tour candidates at this point, So, like you said, the IKF has definitely, it's been languishing for some time.
Mm-hmm.
At least in terms of its presence in the minds of anybody who is not racing it. Their website was and still is, pretty quiet. Their social media presence, at least from what I can tell, is pretty much non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that that's down to resources, but I think that's kind of the point. I think that's why SCUSA have come along in that, the IKF is tapped out. They don't have the resources that they need to succeed or even grow. Having said that, it sounds like they still, manage, I think, about 50 tracks or so. I think it's pretty interesting. Let me see. We got Christian in the lobby here. Christian Marsh is gunning to jump on the show. Let's bring him on here.
Christian Marsh of DR North America.
Yep. What's going on, guys?
Yep. Christian, how's it going, mister?
Good. Hi, Christian. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good. Finally got all the mic stuff worked out, hopefully. So.
Yeah, we got it worked out. So, what do you take on the IKF and SCUSA thing? What's your take on it?
I mean, personally, if you look at, everyone's saying that SCUSA is going to make it another Pro Tour, I just don't think realistically that's going to happen. Their regional stuff has been really successful, what they do with the California Pro Kart Challenge and series like that. And I think that hopefully they just kind of give IKF the support it needs to come back to what it once was. And I think SCUSA can definitely do that.
I tend to think you're right, Christian. I think trying to make it another Pro Tour or even a Pro Car Challenge at this point is probably unrealistic. I think IKF tends to cater to a slightly different crowd, especially in the last, say, 5 to 6 years. I think it's a lot more local-centric. IKF has shifted from having a truly good sprint kart regional presence, say on par, I'd say, in terms of quality and depth of competition, about 10 years ago with something like a Pro Kart Challenge, or even you could argue a Pro Moto Tour at times, to being a lot more of a support system for those local clubs that otherwise may have a disparity between their rules or not be able to really kind of have a lot of organization behind them that takes care of a lot of the back end, track insurance, a really solid rule set for so many different classes, things that you can run locally. So I don't really envision IKF ever taking the place of, really the SCUSA kind of Pro Tour at this point, because I think that's really the only kind of premier national karting organization or series that really is around kind of nationwide at this point. But I am certainly curious to see how they're going to bridge that gap from where IKF has really shrunk to kind of getting them back and stable. And I hope they can do it.
Absolutely.
So what you working on these days, Christian?
Just staying busy, really. I actually just got back from Atlanta Motorsport Park 4 hours ago. I'm in New Hampshire at the DR shop. Went down there to visit their facility and drop off their new set of karts. The absolutely gorgeous facility. I've been to a lot of tracks in my life, and it takes the gamut as far as facilities go. I mean, they've got simulators and offices and classrooms. They really, I think that over the next couple of years or even the next year, they'll start making a footprint on the sport down in the Atlanta region for sure.
So, I've heard about as they were constructing it, the Atlanta Motorsports Park. Just for those that may not know, is it, on the say Road Atlanta facility or anywhere related to that, or is it just a completely standalone thing, kind of in the Atlanta region?
Uh,
Um,
Completely standalone thing. It's actually about 30 minutes up the road
mhm.
from Road Atlanta. But they actually have a sports car track as well as a karting track at AMP.
Nice.
So Road Atlanta would definitely be their premier competition in the region. But no, it's a completely standalone facility.
Well, that's great, and it sounds like from what you saw, the facility really is prepped for being able to cater to both local kind of arrive and drive, and then also national, professional karting series and those sorts of events. That's great. I think to hear of another one of those coming along and really having a good game plan and infrastructure in mind is always a positive thing, especially in today's times. But what would you say was your biggest takeaway from your interaction with that staff, beyond just kind of all the bells and whistles they had? Who is there, to really kind of drive the facility forward, do you think?
Um, they actually, so they're currently in search for someone to kind of handle the competitive racing aspect of their karting, whether it be setting up their customers' carts or just kind of being there to have that support level for their club racers. Um, it started off, the facility was just intended to be a sports car track, and it was designed by an F1 track designer that got to the facility and said, "Hey, why don't we put a kart track over there?" So that's part of what we're looking to help them out with right now. So if anyone wants to move to Atlanta and be a part of that operation, they're definitely in search for some help for their karting program.
Hmm.
But Slade is the gentleman that runs their karting program, and he comes from a background in motocross, and he's just super passionate about it. And you can tell he's just one of those guys that's trying to take care of the club racer and make sure that everyone, not only has a good experience, but uh, has a good facility to share that experience with, friends and family. And they're in their infancy. But I think that with the right support and help, they're definitely going to start getting going on their karting program there for sure.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is what you mentioned about the sim setup. They had some sim racing going on. How big of a setup did I have? Is it pretty substantial?
Yeah, they actually, I was able to see their simulator set up in their main building. Um, and they've actually got two $15,000 like full motion simulators,
Nice.
hydraulics,
Oh man.
iRacing, top level, wheels and functionality, that they are currently using for like their school instructing over at the car track.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they're doing like a $10 million renovation on their karting facilities with a couple of new buildings and garages. And I think their plan is to move the simulators over to the karting side of the facility and utilize them over there a little bit more.
Yeah, there's an interesting topic I just pulled up here is the whole sim racing and karting. Because I know I've got two people here that would be good to talk about it, including you, Christian. So, um, well, tell us more about what you're doing with sim racing. I know you got a ton of different things going on, but I've seen some posts from you lately that you're working on sim racing stuff too, right?
Yeah, I've actually been building a couple of play seats for my dad's company at Rocketech, mainly just to use for personal, as well as I'll do some driver development stuff with them. But really, it's finding like an even balance between the really extravagant, iRacing or R Factor type of sim versus something more attainable to the public, like a console sim. I know Davin is really into the esports with the Xbox One platform. Um, so that's something that, as a driver coach, I really preach sim racing. Not necessarily that, if it's going to develop you specifically to a track or a car setup, but more so just to get those reflexes and muscle memory of sitting in a seat and driving in a crowd and just creating that natural reaction that we get with seat time. A lot of people in the country obviously don't have the luxury of having tracks that can be open 365 days a year. So us being up in the north, that's something that we utilize a lot. And I think that it really is a value that I definitely preach to all of my driver development clients, that if you're sitting around in the winter not doing anything, you should be on a sim.
Yeah. What do you think, Eric? Do you think it's a useful training tool?
You know, it's interesting because when iRacing really first came on the scene, one of my good friends and a coach of mine at the time, Joel Miller, was kind of going up through the Star Mazda Road to Indy ladder. And I remember as a result, we were at PRI and I got to try iRacing the first year. And, you know, at the time, obviously the visuals and the graphics were maybe not as real, but you could immediately get that sense that they'd gone to that next level to make it beyond just an arcade game to really something that you can use in the manner that Christian's speaking. And I held off on using iRacing or something like that for myself for quite some time, but recently got into it. Granted, maybe not on even the level that Christian's at, but the one thing that I do struggle with personally is visually everything will look right, and you can certainly practice being you know, kind of getting a sense for the basics of vehicle handling or behavior or racing. But there's still that gap between really kind of that seat of the pants feel. So I think it's a great tool for your visual reactions and for your visual cues and understanding visually how to approach a corner or visually how to go through it. But at the end of the day, there is still a gap. But I think just like many things with technology involved, that gap rapidly is being narrowed. So I think it is definitely something of the future. What's interesting, though, granted, karting is, of course, a smaller market overall than all of motorsports, is that some groups have attempted to tackle a karting-specific simulator, and none of them have really been that accurate or really that comprehensive. And I think, you know, I think there's a couple groups in the UK that are really trying to give it another serious go. But I would be curious kind of over, you know, the next 10 years to see if a simulator kind of on the same level as iRacing for karting became available. I know iRacing at one point tried, and from what I read on their forums and heard from people is basically they tried, but to model the mechanics and the behavior of a go-kart was simply too complex.
Yeah, there's just too much stuff that we can't measure, you know? Like, we really don't know exactly what's going on. We know what we can do to adjust it, and how it might behave. We don't really know what's going on in terms of, you know, the dynamicism of the chassis flex and all those kind of things. Yeah, there's Kart Sim, which I think started about 10 years ago, and I've forgotten the developer's name, but he's been working on it for a long time. Got funding about 4 years ago, and it's still in a beta. It's a private beta. I really wish he'd release it, because the videos that I've seen look great. Another one is called Kart Racing Pro, and that one is... He's done a really good job of replicating... Pabosa was his internet name, I guess. He's done a really good job of emulating how Jack feels in a kart. Like, so... It feels pretty authentic until you make a mistake. And then the kart does some really weird stuff where it snaps where you just wouldn't expect it to. But up until that point, it feels really like a kart. You know, it's fun to drive. Those are the two main kart ones that I can think of. Question here from John, the best sim racing programs. You know, they're pretty much anything on the market right now, except maybe your Need for Speed or something. You're going to be able to get value from it, I think, if you take the right approach. That, like you'd kind of hinted at, Eric, earlier, that if you're trying to get specifics of handling dynamics from a simulator, I mean, it's definitely a lot better now than it was 10 or 20 years ago. But I think really you're just kind of, you're not going to be able to do that to a reasonable amount. I think the best value of sim racing, or anything that's like close to a sim, like Forza and stuff like that, is to practice the high level techniques of focus, passing, visualization, you know, looking ahead, all those kind of higher level techniques, without getting too granular into, if I make this change on this car, does it do the same thing in real life? It's more about like practicing the process. And that, when we spoke with Ross Bentley on our podcast last year about, we just pretty much agreed on the same thing, that, you know, if you get too much bogged into the details of how it feels, And if you use it to try and improve your driving skill, it may not actually help that much. It depends on where your level's at too. To list off the ones that are out there, we've got Assetto Corsa, we've got iRacing, we've got Forza, we've got there's another open source one. The name of it escapes my mind right now. But for the most part, you've got Forza on the Xbox. Gran Turismo is decent enough to practice visualization, focus, looking ahead, you're planning your lines, all those kind of things. So I think any of those, it's really just what computer or console you have and your budget, how much you want to delve into it. I mean, you could go buy a $50 steering wheel if you want, or you could spend an absolute, like Christian was saying earlier, you could spend a lot of money on the sim rig if you want to, just like kart racing. But I think it's pretty interesting. I think probably the other avenue too is, how is sim racing impacting karting participation and vice versa. And that's why I thought it was pretty interesting when Christian mentioned that they had a sim racing setup at AMP. So it'd be interesting to see if we have any kind of cross-pollination going on. So that's always a good topic. I don't get to sim much these days, but I used to play Grand Prix Legends a lot. I love that game. That was awesome. Basically driving a bathtub at 200 miles an hour in between people's houses. It's ridiculous.
I think Wild Duck Racing mentioned, I remember this episode of Top Gear. Jeremy Clarkson tried to match his sim time at a track and was not physically able to do it. I think that was at Laguna Seca with a Honda NSX many, many years ago. Probably, I think, actually with one of the, second or third generation Gran Turismo games. And, my comment with that, I think, is even to this day, obviously some of the risks you might take or your judgments that you would make in a sim where you're sitting behind a screen versus being in the actual car, I think, is another area where no matter who you are, it's an unavoidable part that unless you feel completely immersed in it, your instinct to go for a pass or go for a late braking maneuver or really drive that extra little bit into a corner, I think for most people is certainly different, right? So some of the risks you might take in a video game or the things you might do in a video game because of the physics versus real life allows you to get away with some things in a lap time that maybe isn't feasible in the real life. But I would say, Christian, and you can comment on this as well, if you get yourself in something like iRacing, even R-Factor, Assetto Corsa, another one that I think probably from a visual aspect is the most stunning, assuming all other things equal, is probably Project Cars. All of those will certainly be entertaining and pretty close to the real thing, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, as far as console sims go, and I think Davin will attest to this, is really the new Project Cars 2 that was just released for console, and then Codemasters does an absolute fantastic job with their simulation stuff. So that would be like the Formula One branded games or the Dirt series of rally games. And like you guys said, it's so hard to get that real feeling of being in a car or a kart and racing. I think Project Cars does a pretty good job at not necessarily giving you a negative over bad driving habits, but giving you a positive over good ones. I know as a driver coach, you've got to kind of, especially with the really new people, you've got to break it down to such a basic level of pushing on the wheel, push, don't pull. And I see personally that those things are rewarded in the way the cars react in a program like Project Cars. But really, like James pointed out, it's just getting the functionality of you're sitting in a seat with a wheel in front of you, holding it and making laps around a track. And I can't really attest to the level of racing that Davin does with the esports stuff, but I would assume that brings a little bit more of a serious level to the decisions you make and going for those passes and things of that sport, just because they tend to take it a little more seriously.
Yeah, you don't want to do a Scott Speed and get your ass banned. That's a bad idea. Did you read about that? Scott Speed got apparently banned from iRacing.
Yeah, I saw that today.
I don't know if like somebody set up a troll account, started driving around as him or what, but
No,
that's funny.
I was actually doing. I did a fair bit of research on that because I was so surprised. Obviously, so for those that may not know, iRacing has kind of a different approach to how they administer and how they handle users and kind of your, I guess, behavior online than other sims. But the most interesting thing is, at least for a while, either officially or unofficially, I don't know exactly. Scott Speed was a spokesman for iRacing and was posting a lot of content, was really hyping it up, and showing all his GRC stuff. And then there was an incident on the track, and it looked pretty obvious that Scott Speed attempted to retaliate against another driver. That they had an incident that looked, I think, by all objective people would say was either accidental or really maybe wasn't called for. But regardless, I guess iRacing made the decision to suspend him. But the really interesting thing about that, of course, is that the news has extended beyond just the internet realm, right? And the forums on iRacing. It's a whole thing. So it's a big deal when a quote unquote real driver versus someone that's just races iRacing. Although I would argue some of the really skilled people in iRacing are just as talented as real drivers. In terms of at least how much effort they put in and thought. But it was, I think, it's very interesting to see how that argument goes out, because it's bringing back up this thought of, well, does it really matter if someone retaliates on a video game? And a lot of people obviously get up in arms about, well, it's just a sim or whatever. But I think it's telling that that there are real ramifications in the real world for something you do online in a sim. So it does beg the question how much, socially or just in general about the competitive attitude is similar versus different in the iRacing community or the sim racing community versus, at the kart track. But it does seem that people, and there still are repercussions for poor driving.
Yeah. So we've got Dustin Corder in the lobby here. We'll bring him on in just a moment for the show. Kristen, you've got the mic. What do you want to say? Nothing rude now. What you got going on? What tell us what you've got going on for the rest of this year.
The rest of this year, honestly, just continuing to progress with the operations here at DR North America. We've been really busy trying to expand the brand up into Canada. We're currently talking to a couple of different prospective dealers in the Alberta area. And really just trying to, for me personally, it feels like karting's kind of got to a place that, a lot of these teams you hear, almost these horror stories just in the way the drivers and customers under the tents are being treated and things of that sort. And when I was growing up racing, even when we had support from teams and factories, it was just kind of a different era. It was still a lot of people showing up in the back of their pickup truck, wrenching on their own stuff, ready to go. And that's just not something we see nowadays. So really a big focus for me is kind of creating that happy, healthy environment in the form of a big national karting team.
Christian, I really like that comment. It's refreshing to hear you say that, and also just that general comment about karting, because I agree. I think I obviously wasn't around you when you were growing up in karting, but I grew up in an era where a lot of people did it out of the pickup truck. And yeah, there were serious, quote unquote factory efforts, but a kart shop and a kart dealer was still there to help their local community first and foremost before the national stuff. And it's refreshing to hear you guys taking that approach. Wild Duck Racing, it asks what sets DR and DR North America apart from other chassis. What about the 206 program? Sounds like you guys are doing a lot on that end.
Yeah, so I'm going to be completely honest with you in the way that I look at the products in karting, and that's that I'm not going to sit here and say that there's anything particularly that sets the DR product apart from another chassis as far as quality goes, because people that are in the industry know that there's quality everywhere. You know, you don't see a higher quality out of an OTK component than you do a DR or a CRG component. And the frames are all used in a very similar way nowadays. I think what sets DR apart from other programs is, like I said before, is just the support level. You know, we use LAD racing engines for all of our non-gearbox stuff, and Fisher for our gearbox stuff. And when we go to a national race, Scott Grenier from LAD is actually under our tent all weekend, full time with us. And Fisher spends a good amount of time under our tent, as he does, you know, everyone under Fisher Racing Engines. You know, we have a direct link with the factory and a good relationship with Danilo, and that he comes to some of our larger events here and gives us that support, as well as you know, he accepts our feedback that we send them on you know, new products and things of that sort. So I really don't feel that, you know, obviously our price point is lower than some of your, you know, OTK or CRG chassis for the same quality, you know, magnesium components, hubs, things of that sort. But I'd say what really sets us apart is just the support that we have under the tent.
That's
Awesome.
really cool. That's really great, man. Well, I wish you guys well in expanding that, and it sounds like you guys are taking a really healthy and kind of new approach to that, focusing a little bit more on the customer service side. So it was good to have you on, Christian, and I'm excited to see what you guys do this year.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and shout out to Christian too. Before we move on to Dustin here, you know, he's done a lot of really awesome video, and both with Dior and prior to that he's shared with KartPulse and some awesome photos as well. So shout out to Christian for helping us out with that, and he was giving me all sorts of tips when I was at the Supernats and on how not to shoot video. But we had a good time. All right, well, we'll probably talk later in the year, man.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Talk to you later. Take care.
Take care, Christian.
Bye. Dustin.
So that was, yeah. That was
We have
Christian Marsh now.
another Colorado person. Let's bring him on here. Lube up. Wait, I said that out loud, didn't I? Dustin, how are you doing, sir?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Sweet. Yeah.
I'm sorry that you can hear us. We're doing good. No complaints. You're here with me, obviously, and Eric, who I believe you're both from pretty much the same area, or at least you're living there, right? In Colorado.
Yep.
Yeah, we
Talk
both
to Eric.
we talk to each other relatively regularly, and he gets to yell at me, tells me everything I do wrong, and he goes out and tries to whoop up on everyone.
Yeah, nice. So I don't know you that well, but you know, just from Facebook, but from what I've been able to ascertain from your comments, it sounds like that you've been around the sport for a while. Your dad's been around for quite some time as well, and you took a hiatus and then you came back. Is that accurate? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, James, it is. Yeah. Like a lot of people, you know, growing up in karting, I started when I was 10 years old, raced till we raced till 2005 with karts, and then 2008 with some other stuff. And then it was a goal to be a career race car driver, and it didn't work out. Wouldn't change anything. It was a blast. And my parents have always been super supportive of it. Was just looking over some setup notes that my mom had from the 4-cycle showdown. And, you know, my dad's super good with chassis setup, and I love driving. So.
Awesome. So did your dad race karts too, or was he just involved when you were getting into racing yourself as a kid?
He never did any organized racing. He was just both, you know, super supportive of my efforts, and he's into it. He's done some races here and there. I think the last time he raced was mechanics or dad's race back in probably 1996 at SBR here in Colorado. He raced the 80 shifter and did well, and he said he'll retire that, leaving it like that. So
nice.
Retire on top. That's all right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Finish out on top. So, what you got planned for this year?
It's all tentative right now. A lot of it, again, you know, hinges on budget. I think the plan right now is to continue with the LO stuff. I don't ever have plans of going away from 4-cycle racing. I think it's the best thing you could do to hone your drills for, in my case, KZ moving towards stock moto again. I think both, help one another, help me as a driver, stay brushed up. And so to answer your question, some local stuff with Colorado Karting Tour, stock moto, S1, and then LO 206, and street races, Elkhart Grand Prix. Are going to do that one again for sure, and then try to hit IKF 4-cycle nationals and super nationals.
So you did the Elkhart last year?
Yeah, we did. We went out there, Christian Virgil, along with, of course, my parents. Went out. I raced the stock moto and a couple of their LO classes. It was a great event. It's huge, and I think they're expecting a bigger and better turnout this year. So.
Yeah, it looks like USAC Karting are gathering momentum. I mean, they had a really good first year, for sure, and I think they've done a good job of, rather than just trying to run a bunch of races and from a rule book, they're just focused on not even just races, but events. They're kind of destination events and destination races. So you've got Indy, Elkhart, and did I have a third one? No, but the park is coming back, and I think that's a USAC sanctioned event too. So yeah, I mean, it's awesome to see some of these old, races that went away, I think, in the mid to late 90s come back again. Before my time in the US, kind of racing here. So, did you race any of those street races, Eric?
No, I didn't. We did a few, I guess, more technically parking lot races, but with the hay bales and everything with IKF. But I've always wanted to. I've always wanted to go do something like Rock Island or that Elkhart race. I really wish I had the time to go. Hopefully, maybe I'll be able to tag along with Dustin this year. But we'll see as time comes. But those sorts of events are really cool, right? You look at that event or the Streets of Lancaster, or I think there's a few that are being brought back now. It's really refreshing, and I think it's a cool way to bring karting at a variety of levels to the local community, for them to see it literally right in front of their front porch or where they work or right in their community. So I always support those events. I know locally we would love to do one. It's just about finding the time and the money and a community that wants to do it. But Dustin, I think, is awful humble. He may not have disclosed all of his background, but he's been around the sport a fair bit, many, many years. Took a pretty significant hiatus, but now is back. His father, Chuck, did more than just race. He was actually a race director, pretty involved on the administrative side and running events at one point. So we should certainly have him on at some point. But Dustin, what would you say from your perspective from when you were a younger driver and you kind of, by the time you left karting to when you just came back this next year or this last year? Obviously, your approach and your intensity to it and the results you got on track was just as good and just as serious. But what would you say was the difference in your feeling about the community? Maybe not just in Colorado because you got to travel. What would you say that experience was like?
It's an interesting question. Christian, that y'all had on earlier, Christian talked about the race support and the teams and that type of stuff. I'm right there with him on what he was saying. Also, I think, it was really cool and really, very much appreciated that, some of the folks that had been around or knew of us when we were around before, we were welcomed back, with open arms and just great community here in Colorado. And then very pleased to see where, the Colorado Karting Tour is doing a lot of great things for karting locally here. And,
Ruh-roh.
Yeah, we might have lost audio there. Hopefully it'll come back.
I think you're back now, Dustin. We lost a bit of sentence from you there.
Oh, okay. So when I was racing before, we had, the several different tracks. Each track had their own club. So like Bandamere, which is now Action Karting, we raced at Bandamere as IKAC. We raced at IMI as IMI. Now it's, it's the way it needs to be with, a tour, and we're running 5 different tracks this upcoming season. And that's awesome. It's more fun for us racers, and, I just think it's great. The organization that listens to people, the racers, we get our input, and, and we didn't necessarily have that before. It was just stay quiet, come race, our rules. And that kind of was the way it was. A lot more.
Ruh-roh. Dustin's gone again.
Yeah, it sounds like
it's always when he's about to say something super important, and then his mic cuts off.
Then it cuts out, right?
His internet breaks, or Dustin, someone's breaking your internet, man.
Sorry, we got
can
some
you hear
Super
me
Bowl
now?
interference.
Super Bowl? What? I'm 6 miles from the Super Bowl, and I don't hear it, except from your family, your roommates in Colorado. That's kind of messed up.
I don't know how much it's showing through, but
just a little bit.
There's not a whole lot I can do. Just if you ever need to, just go ahead and mute me.
Yeah, it's all good. Hopefully, we have audio from Dustin again.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. You're back. Oh,
I'm
and
sorry.
You're not back. Oh dear. This is not good. Experiencing technical difficulties.
This is the challenge of live.
Live, yep.
Live production. But, well.
I think Steve from Wild Duck Racing should call in too.
Yeah, he's been interacting a lot. He should definitely call in, let us know.
He should hop on the show here.
Yeah, Dustin.
His son, whose name escapes my mind right now. But sign up. Click the link. Say hi.
Yeah, Dustin. I think what you said about the CKT side is definitely well taken. I appreciate that, and I think a lot of other people appreciate it. But one thing James mentioned is some of those events that you got to travel to, like Elkhart, or recently you went down to Rock in Phoenix. What do you think nowadays? Would you like to see how could those series make those events more than just a race for you, to where it's something that you look forward to for more than just going to show up and drive? What would you like to see from a racer's perspective, someone in the pits, quote unquote, the back gate, that would really make those events stand out and more memorable? Thinking back to all the kart races you've been throughout your career.
I don't know if it's necessarily anything that, like Challenge could do. Andy Seisman puts on a great, event. The thing that I remember racing SCUSA, we raced with the Pro Tour for a couple years, and Jim Murley had it set up, where it was up and coming. And there was, I walked through Super Nationals this last year, and it's all closed off tents. Right. There's a reason for that. I don't knock it at all, but I remember walking through the pits at Norman, Oklahoma, and in the evening, if you wanted it took you 2 hours just to, say hi to everybody. And I love that. I miss that. To me, that's a lot of what karting is about. And, it's great in a lot of ways, but I personally, I really dislike walls on tents. I wish that they would put that in the rule book. No walls on your tents. And, it's different. There's a place for it. I don't knock it at all. I just, and I don't know if that answers your question, Eric, but that's the one thing that stands out to me. Challenge was a very well-run event. I have to give USAC Karting a shout out, because they care about the racer. They really do, and they let that show. I had $700 in USAC bucks that I just used to enter Elkhart for this year, and it covered all but $15 of it,
wow.
Including tires.
Nice.
Wow,
that helps.
And did they give you that as a sort of incentive to show up, or was that something you had, or how did that work?
So that was winnings from the past event. So we placed second and two different classes and first in one of the classes, and that's, I think, your top three, maybe top five got USAC bucks. And it's a great way to do it. I've been to races where they'll give you 500 or whatever cash, but this is a great way for them to bring racers back in, and it helps guys like myself out. I would like to see a lot more of that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot more fun when you have the race fans out there. The streets, the fences were lined all the way around the track at Elkhart. They had live bands and all that type of stuff in the infield. You're never, I don't think, going to get that at a racetrack. But just the racer appreciation, is good for everybody.
That's interesting that you made that last comment about you won't really see it at a racetrack. It's almost wherever the racing is, there's no people. But if you actively create a racetrack around where there are people, suddenly you get it just packed, right? So I think that's an interesting dichotomy I hadn't really thought about before, but definitely something to reflect on. Because I know out here in Colorado, for example, all the tracks, even though they're around the Denver metro and they're really not that far away compared to other regions. And I think all things considered, we have decent turnout of just random people. It's not like an Elkhart Grand Prix or a Lancaster Grand Prix where it's literally through the streets of a town. So that's definitely an interesting question and definitely an interesting point. And now you're on the side of being a chassis dealer. Do you find that those sorts of events do more for driving value for Intrepid Kart versus success on a traditional racetrack, or do you think that it's still about win on Sunday, sell on Monday, that sort of model for an Intrepid or for a DR for you guys? What is your perspective from that end?
That's an interesting question. I think it's worth noting that, a lot of your street courses or temporary courses, you'll see that they're primarily like a left-hand dominant course. So you see a lot of left-hand offset chassis there, and they do very well. They're hard to keep up with.
Interesting.
All your weight's on the inside, and they got full body work, which I love. But you bounce off of them like a ping pong if they want you to. So I think, for we did well there. The Intrepid did well. I don't know, what effect that may or may not have on it. I think I'm more of a consistent, like the Challenge of Americas. If there's race support with a racer or a group of racers, and everybody puts their efforts together, I think over time that's kind of what helps the brand, if you will. There's a lot of really good chassis out there. There's some good ones that people may have a misconception on that are not good. But I think all in all, it's just kind of win on Sunday, test on Monday, maybe sell on Tuesday. You got to keep progressing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. As Christian kind of pointed out earlier, the quality pretty much amongst the brands is pretty good, with one or two minor exceptions that really aren't selling very well anyway. They're not very well known. So really, the question is what differentiates the chassis from each other. And I think in a lot of ways, it's fairly minute. This question comes up in the forums a lot too of, what chassis should I get? And people tend to talk in terms of brands, which to me makes really not a lot of sense. Because it really depends on the support that's around you, and it also depends on the deals that are available to you as well. But ultimately, what does well at another race at a different track on different tires to what that particular person is running may or may not translate into a good performance for them. So I think it's good that we're seeing more dealers kind of not necessarily, should I say, come back to the local tracks. But there's definitely been a more recent emphasis and some more resources being placed to kind of have those conversations to help racers kind of figure out their setup at the local track too. So that's the one encouraging thing. I honestly think that's going to be the future. I'm personally like super tired of the sales pitch to buy a chassis being, we want something. Like, who hasn't really? Like, pick a brand across the US that has not won something somewhere. It's not a differentiator, and that's why it's good to see more dealers and brands kind of pick up on that it, okay, it's cool and all, but you kind of got to go deeper if you want to connect with those people at the local and even regional level to help them kind of understand how it's going to translate into better performance for them. But that's a good question. It's a bit of a dichotomy to have, especially at a street track, because it's unlike anything else, super bumpy, super unforgiving, and but it's fun. But yeah, at the Rock Island when I was there, not so much in the shifters, but you can see the 4Cycles, a lot of LTO chassis. I thought they'd made a bit of a ruling recently regarding LTO though, but I could be wrong on that. But I think they had made some sort of ruling on LTO for maybe the 206 class. Does that sound familiar?
For me, the only thing I'm aware of is, and this is the past couple of years, was the European offset chassis being allowed with WKA, I think. But as far as a ruling on offsets for temporary courses, I haven't heard anything. And I don't have a problem with the offsets there. I think it's a good way to provide, everybody's welcome. If I can't run with them, I'll get a offset. But with, the race support and locally and that type of stuff, that support is important for parts and setup. I also think that it would be, we used to have, more people, privateer race teams, it seems like people were maybe more eager to get out there and learn chassis setup versus just pay to be under a tent of a chassis, somebody that sells a certain chassis. And, I think it's great if you want to do it that way, but I also think people should take initiative to try to keep learning. That's how you're really going to get fast. If you understand the why behind why I'm going to put caster in it, then I might have a better sense on the track is what my kart's doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a process. That's the thing. I think that sometimes gets mixed up with people. And again, on the forums, this comes up a lot. Folks come in and there's an expectation that there's an answer. And really, there's no clear answer. It's always about the process of your driving style, where you're at that particular time, and all those other factors that really nobody has control over except you. So, you need to understand the process of how you're going to go about tuning for yourself rather than too much of the specifics. Like, will this specific setup that somebody else is using work on my kart? It might not. But, you need to have that expectation, like you're saying, to put some time in to learn what changes are going to make a difference for your chassis and what's going to work for you. It's that process of just tweaking and changing and observing the differences, just like any other form of racing, really. But, well, Intrepid have a good setup guide too, from what I recall, right? I remember picking up a copy of it a couple of years ago, and it's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, out of the box, they're great. It's the Intrepid to me has a feel all their own, and then, there's information available, out there for Intrepid, and then there's always somebody willing to help you. I know, like Patrick with Karting Concepts, he's available. Champion Racing, those guys are available. Cell phones are always on, and but the info is definitely, out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something that Christian talked about as well, as having that local support or having that support for the chassis. A lot of them, if you know what you're doing, you can work well with pretty much any of them. But it's about having, kind of the right thing at the right time and understanding why. Right. So whether you're at a national event or a regional event, having the tools at your disposal, having the infrastructure there really matters. You touched on other forms of racing, and Dustin, like myself, you've gotten to sample things other than karting. And as much as James may roll his eyes, some people think about driving other things, whether it's as a career or just because they like driving a spec Miata or whatever it is. What would you say it is about karting that translates so well to when you went and drove on an oval track or on dirt or those other forms of racing? What would you say it is that makes karting such a great training ground, regardless of whether your ambition is to be a pro racing driver or, hey, I just want to try a different form of racing? What is it about that grounding in karting that helped you kind of move beyond, move to other forms?
It's there's a lot to it, as far as driving. Go-karts are physically demanding. It keeps you in shape, but things happen so quick. There's no live suspension, so it's super sensitive. You're when you make some steering input on a go-kart, you got to be careful, subtle, smooth. Where you move into a full suspension car, you just think to yourself like, man, things are happening so slow. And
Right.
for me, it gives me, time to, it's like, all right, you get more time to learn the line or focus on other things versus like in a go-kart, it's so much more unforgiving, if you will. And I think as a kid, it's great because you can learn, how to work on your stuff, how to appreciate your stuff, how to talk to people, how to win, how to lose, and that type of stuff sets you up well for a future career in or out of motorsports. But the driving part of it, I think, is go-karts. You see career race car drivers in all forms of motorsports come back to go-karts to train, to stay brushed up, or just to have kind of me with the 4-cycle and the 125. I can go to the 4-cycle and drive that for a while, and then I get back into the 125, and it's all kind of settled down, and I see different things on a track that I didn't see before, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does because I noticed that when I went to other forms of racing, maybe not so much a legend car or even on dirt, but some of them it moves so much slower. Things happen so much slower, so that you're used to that instant, direct relationship with the kart that everything seems more predictable, and it makes that transition a little bit easier. An interesting little side note on that, Wild Duck mentions he's asking, didn't KartPulse do a podcast talking to someone about L206 spec chassis and spec gear sets? And I think I'm not sure about the spec gear set part, but we did talk to Greg Welch a couple weeks ago about his thought on a spec 4-stroke chassis, and his comment is he thought it was kind of unnecessary. And I think that I suspect this is something you'll agree on, Dustin, is that you don't really need a 4-stroke specific chassis. You just need to know how to work on it, which goes back to that comment about really knowing what you're working with and understanding why. A lot of people nowadays say, oh, I have to have this certain brand or I have to do it this way. Whereas really, if you just put in the work to test and try different things, within certain regions, there are certain things, certain chassis that might be simply too stiff compared to a really soft chassis, but most of them will work. Most of them can work if you work at it and try different things. So, did we have a podcast about an L0206 spec chassis?
Yeah, I just looked it up here, and it was episode 17. I think it was the VLR spec chassis with Mike Smith. And Davin spoke with Mike Smith about their VLR class, which has gone really well. And the main advantage of the spec chassis is really just decision fatigue for the customer. Like, people just, when they get into the sport, they're overwhelmed with the different kinds of classes, tires, what track, all those kind of things. And of course, sometimes they're not even sure what chassis to run. They're not sure. For example, recently I heard somebody went to buy a tag chassis, but it had front brakes on it, and it's kind of in that classic chasm of, well, you can have tags with front brakes, but I don't think they're really commonly used anymore. There was a time when tag was in its prime where front brakes on tags were more common, but then we have to explain that also you could use that with a shifter and all those kind of things. And what's great about the spec chassis and the spec classes is for people who can afford it, because it's more expensive. It takes up less of your time, so you're exchanging less of your money. Is you just turn up and everything is a known quantity. It's it's like that step up from rental kart racing in a way, because you're going to get something that's more competitive. It's less of a crapshoot, which is sometimes a problem in indoor racing or rental karts. And you're just moving up that little bit more, I think, and I think that's why it's become so successful. Is folks that have more disposable income, they just get tired trying to make a decision on what chassis to buy or what class to join, and the likes of the VLR and the Ignite Series just makes it easy. Like, oh yeah, it looks like a well-known brand, looks like a legitimate chassis. I can see 30 other people are running it. Why would I not do that?
Yeah, so Dustin, I know your dad and you both are habitual tinkerers, people that like that challenge, that engineering challenge, right? What do you think about something like that, about a spec chassis? I think you are pro spec engine or pro having a pretty tight box, but you like having some room to play and some room to test. Do you think moving all the way over to a VLR is something that maybe new racers, people that have that decision fatigue would embrace, but do you think for existing racers that do like the testing process and do like knowing that they've really got some sort of edge because they have they've put in the work, do you think that you would find a class like that still appealing, or do you think that that's going a little too far to the point where now it's a little too spec for someone like yourself?
The best class, the most fun I ever had racing and go-karting was with Easy Kart. And, that was a spec engine, spec chassis, spec axle, spec gear. And that was some close racing, and it was fast. So I'm sitting here thinking of pros and cons and visualizing, with CKT having a spec LO class with whatever chassis, if it's VLR. I don't know much about VLR. I looked into them. They seem very cost effective. They're very fast on a grippy track. But regardless, I would have this thinking I have no problems with that. I think, it might even be something to consider for a karting club. It's a way to put money in the bank and progress. Who has that dealership, as an Intrepid dealer or any dealer, right? I might be like, well, we're going to a spec chassis, but I don't sell that chassis, right? For me, I wouldn't have any issues with that, but I think, it would be cool to have the club be the dealer, and it would be advantageous for the club as well. I would see it as putting some tougher racing, harder racing in there. Yeah, we do like to do chassis setup, and even with the spec gear, I would have no issue with that. But I without giving it too much thought, I would see it as throwing some good racing in there, maybe a way to bring people into karting a little bit more than's already being done here, and keep some guys in it. Spec is cool.
All right. Well, so a couple things that I think you may know about KartPulse at this point is they have the hashtag, and James is big on keeping karting fun. And you've touched on a couple of ways that you would like to see karting stay fun. And one of the big ones for you, I think, is get rid of the walls on tents, regardless of the level of competition. But if you had to get on your soapbox and give a 30-second pitch on, the one thing you wish, aside from that, that you wish you saw at the track, that would, keep everyone having a little more fun and reminding themselves that, Roger Penske isn't lining the fence. And yeah, it's important to take it seriously, but it's also important to have some fun and respect your competitors. What would that be?
That's a loaded question. The answer is simple, but you could go on all day about it. I'd say, for me, just remember, why we're here. Yeah, we might have other goals as far as, I want to go race cars, and you might be working very hard towards that goal, and it's a serious business, but you wouldn't, nobody put a gun to your head and say, hey, you have to race go-karts. So I've never had that happen to them. So we're here to have fun. We chose to be here. Everyone makes mistakes, and, if you communicate well and realize that there's probably no true malicious intent from anyone, here, just get along, have fun at the track. don't put the walls on your easy ups, and stay humble when you win, and be graceful when you lose. And there's always next weekend, and there's worse places to be than the racetrack, right?
That's 100% true.
No walls on easy ups. Is that a new hashtag, do we think, or? Yeah,
let's make it.
I mean, I think that the thing about keeping karting fun or anything fun is like it's kind of universal, especially even more so if you are looking to pursue a career in auto racing. If you're not able to find the fun in what you do, you're going to be pretty miserable, because it's only going to get tougher to find more and more money to kind of rise up the ranks. So I mean, I know it's easy to say keep karting fun, but really it's it's not necessarily like this, hard attainable goal. It's more like an overarching, ethos or whatever that you kind of work towards, because it is easy to kind of get super stuck in a rut. And I think the most important thing is to try and figure out what's going to be fun for you on a personal level. And that varies hugely, like on a previous show, like I was saying, sometimes I feel like driving the 206. Sometimes I don't feel like driving the 206. I'll, go out in a shifter or something or whatever. And that's fine. It doesn't really matter what it is per se, just that you go and do it, and, I mean, if you're not able to find fun in it, you're probably going to be a pretty miserable person. But, I mean, if being miserable is working for you, more power to you, right?
It's easier to win if you're having fun, I think.
Yeah, it is easier to win, and it's definitely easier to show up to the track and probably do as close to your best, right? So, and put yourself in a position to where you have an attitude that's going to help you do that. Well, I mean, Dustin, you've given us a lot of your time. Are there topics that you came on the show hoping to chat about, or things you think are important? I know we were talking to Christian briefly about the acquisition of IKF by SCUSA, and everyone's kind of unsure exactly what that means yet, but we all like to, sit in our armchairs and play quarterback, right? So, what issues are pressing on your mind regarding karting?
I don't have any issues right now. I clicked on a link trying to watch, and then but it's very cool. I appreciate you guys bringing me on. With the SCUSA IKF thing, that's interesting because IKF has had a big part in my life with go-karting, and it was always the goal to get a Duffy. So I think that's on the top of the priority list this year, just to make sure we get one. Hopefully, it's and I'm sure it will be treated right, where we have, it's just a way to not have like karting so segregated, and then we get, because we get too many classes, we get too many engine packages, and personally, I don't care what it is, I'll race it. It's fun, but I like to see big fields. I like competition, because frankly, I love winning, but it wouldn't be fun just to win all the time and have no competition. So I think just the bigger classes, and I think it's a great move. I hope it works out well, and I'm sure it will.
Right on. Well said.
Yeah.
So no issues on this end though. I'm looking forward to race season here locally and getting out to the track. Some warm days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Today's too cold. I'm definitely looking forward to getting to the track soon.
Wait, Steve wants to ask about your hat, Dustin. The USAC hat.
So this is just a hat I got in at Elkhart last year. They had the swag trailer set up before the races, and we were walking around, and you got to get a shirt or a hat or something. And I think USAC karting is great. I love those guys, and I wish there was more events, but you can count on the events that they do put on, being very well run. And like those USAC bucks I was talking about, my bill for Elkhart in 2018 is $15, and that includes tire bill because of the USAC bucks.
That's awesome.
But if you wish, you can go to the swag trailer and get a dozen hats with the USAC bucks too.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
you could get all those hats and throw them out to the crowd at Elkhart, right? Feel like a rock star.
Yeah, be a crowd favorite. No, I'm excited about that now. Just thinking about it, I'm ready to go to Elkhart right now. But I think, you know, I don't know. I just can't say enough good about him. And I hope that Wild Duck Racing, I hope that answers your question, brother, about the hat.
Yeah. Good deal. Well, it's been pretty quiet tonight for sure, I think, but we kind of anticipated that with the Super Bowl, and it was a little last minute too, because we weren't sure what we were going to do. But Dustin, thanks for joining us, even though you probably weren't intending being shoved on the show, but welcome.
You were good guest, involuntary.
I mean, it's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to convey that. I've been trying a few different ways of phrasing it between, hey, watch the show, or hey, come be on the show. So I don't know. Maybe somebody else has a better way of explaining that. But I was worried that somebody might click on the link and like try and watch the show when it's already on Facebook Live. But hey, we gave it a try, and I think we'll do another one of these again. We'll just have people who want to come by in the lobby, just hop on the show and do a bit of a yip yap, and keep Facebook Live fun. I'm just surprised that someone keeps watching Super Bowl, really.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't know, I don't know why you'd sit and watch that on TV for a little while when you can come on here and talk about karting. But
I guess during all the commercials, you can switch and watch karts, right?
There you go.
I didn't even know the Super Bowl was today, so
yeah.
James,
I'm in Minneapolis. It's actually going on like 7 miles from me right now. I'm in Minneapolis right now doing this. I'm like, the Super Bowl's over there. I'm here talking karts.
As you should.
People. Yeah, exactly. Too many commercials. I can't do commercials. It just drive me nuts. All right. Well, we'll let everybody. Thanks for joining us on today's show. Dustin, thanks for signing in. Eric, again, thanks for your time. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for coming on, Dustin. Christian.
Channel.
See you guys.
See ya.
See ya.
Yeah, it should be a couple of seconds here and we'll be done. Do.
Cool.